Welcome to Wild Times in Minnesota Lake Country with Kelly and Carol. And today we are going to look forward and up. Our special guest, once again, is Dr. Sara Schultz, and she is the director of Planetarium at MSUM, Minnesota State University Moorhead. And welcome, Dr. Schultz.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's always fun to look up every once in a while.
Right. We love to get people outside, no matter where you are, and enjoying the outdoors. And even if that means it's already dark, because that happens in the wintertime, right? By the time I, get off from work, it's already dark again. So I'm actually doing a lot of winter stargazing, whether I like it or not. Dark on my way to work.
It's a lot easier to do it this time of year because, we have a lot more darkness than we do at daytime. So,
and the skies are clearing. You might as
well know what you're looking for, right? Yes, and the skies are often clear too, which makes it a little bit colder, which is a challenge as well, but it's still fun to get out there.
Right. So yes, so we're moving from February into March, and I think it's one of the more beautiful times of the year too, because it's really quiet out on those lakes, and like you said, we start gaining more daylight, but people are more apt to get out because we have been very cabin feverish, I'd say, for the last 10 months. So there's a lot of people needing an excuse maybe to get out, especially in the evening hours.
Unless you're Kelly or Carol, and then you just go outside anyways.
But there is a limit, Kelly. There is a limit.
Oh, come on. No such thing as too cold, just poorly dressed people.
Okay.
Good point.
All right. So Dr. Schultz, let's talk a little bit about what people will be seeing in the next few weeks, days in February and into March as they look up at the sky in Minnesota Lake Country.
Yeah. So we're still in our winter sky officially until, March 21st or so when we transition to spring. However, at this time of year, we can see our winter constellations, and then if you decide to stay up a little bit later, you can start seeing our spring constellations as well. And so I'm going to help you try to find some of those constellations in our sky. And so I will share my screen if that's okay. Mm-hmm. And I will also try to describe what we're seeing as we go for those of you who are just listening in. So can you see the night sky?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Wonderful. Okay, so it looks like we're right about at 7 o'clock. I wanted to show you what we can find in our sky. So if it was too cold for you, because it has been a bit chilly lately, you're waiting for it to warm up a little bit, then you're still going to be able to see this right around 7 o'clock. So right now we're facing south. So if you're wondering which direction to look for south, if you pay attention to where the sun sets, the sunset is going to be off in the west. And so if you're facing where the sunset, then it's going to be on your left. So you're going to turn left and you're going to look towards the south. And you can see here that we've got quite a few things going on in our sky. And actually we've got one planet out, Mars. So if you look off towards the south and look up, you'll probably see what looks kind of like a reddish star. And that's going to be our planet Mars. So Mars is hanging out in our sky. And Uranus is there too, but we can't actually see it with the naked eye. So it's labeled there, but you wouldn't be able to see it. Now, the thing that we're going to look for specifically in the southern sky is Orion. Orion is our most prominent winter constellation. And Orion we typically find by looking for his 3 bright belt stars. So we're looking off to the south, we're facing south, and we're going to look off a little bit to the southeast. And you're going to look for 3 bright stars right in a row. So I'll point those out here. But if you're looking in the sky tonight or in the next month or so, typically you can find Orion's belt. Now, we can go up to his shoulders here. So there's a bright star at his shoulder, kind of an oranger star, and that is Betelgeuse. And we can go down, Rigel down here where his legs are. And so we can take a look at Orion. One really fun thing in Orion is in his belt, kind of is in his midsection here, is the Orion Nebula. So if you have a pair of binoculars, it would be really neat to go and look at that with a pair of binoculars, or if you have a telescope, but more people have binoculars than telescopes, I think. And so if you decide to go out stargazing, take your binoculars with you and check some of these things out. The other thing I really like to point out after you've found Orion is to look up higher in the sky, more towards directly south, and you'll see kind of a V shape. It's a big V shape, and here's that little V shape here. It looks small on our screen, but up in the real sky, it'll be nice and big. That is the face of Taurus the bull. Now, Taurus is pretty fun to look for as well, because that V shape is actually a star cluster. So if you have those binoculars, it's called the Hyades. You can look at the star cluster, the Hyades, with the binoculars, and it'll look pretty neat. And additionally, in Taurus is another star cluster called the Pleiades. And the Pleiades you can see very nicely with the naked eye. But if you have a pair of binoculars, again, you're going to see a much better picture of what that looks like. Now, the one fun thing... Go ahead.
That's 7 stars, right? The Pleiades is a group of 7.
Well, we can see 7. It's actually
okay, good.
The star cluster made up of hundreds of stars, but we can see 6 or 7 with the naked eye.
That's great. That's one of my favorites. I don't know why. I think I just heard a great story about it one time, and
sure.
Always, there's Orion. Now I'm going to look for Pleiades up there. And
it's always been my favorite too, because it's one of those really cool objects that you can see just without any, assistance. And so it also has a really fun name. In Japan, they call it Subaru. So you may have heard of Subaru, and if you notice the logo for those cars, it is made up of stars, and so it's made up of the Pleiades, or the 7 sisters.
Oh, cool!
So yeah, it's pretty neat. And so I think that for me, Taurus is probably one of my favorite constellations, just because it has the Pleiades in it. And so these are 2 of the main constellations you would find in our winter sky looking south. And so I'm going to bring up those constellations just so we can see them a little bit better. That's
great. So now is Pleiades and Taurus, they're part of the Swan? Or
so Taurus is a constellation on its own. He's a bull, Taurus.
Oh, right. Okay.
The Swan is in our summer sky. So Cygnus is part of our summer triangle. And I guess you'll have to have me come back later.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Write that down right now.
I'm just always looking for the wildlife in the sky.
Yes. Well, so we've got, Taurus the bull, but then underneath Orion is Lepus the hare. So you have Lepus the hare down here. Is Orion and his hunting dogs are chasing after Lepus. And so you can find him in the sky tonight and over the next few weeks.
Is that a unicorn I see?
It is a unicorn. Yes, Monoceros is a unicorn. It's not very well known because the stars are not particularly bright. But it kind of looks like Orion's little hunting dog, Canis Minor, is on his back. So if you look for Canis Minor, you can try to find Monoceros the unicorn underneath. So as we're transitioning closer and closer to March and into April, we're going to see some other constellations in our sky. And so I want to show you how to find one of our prominent ones. So you can find these tonight or the next few weeks if you stay up later. So as our Earth is turning, we see different constellations at different times of the night. And so we would be, as we transition throughout the night, we're going to start seeing some of our spring constellations. So I'm just advancing time. Now you can see we're getting closer and closer to midnight. So you have to be a bit more of a night owl. But if you do decide to stay up, now notice our constellations that we're looking at have transitioned over to the east. And so now we're looking south again, closer to midnight, and we're going to look for a backwards question mark. And that backwards question mark is going to be the head and front end of our lion, Leo. And so we're going to look from south up for a backwards question mark right here. You see my backwards question mark?
Yes.
There it is.
That's very cool.
And that is Leo. Well, that's the star in Leo, but we can take a look at Leo as well. So Leo is our prominent spring constellation. So we know when we start seeing Leo in our sky more that we're transitioning towards springtime. And so he's typically the one that we look for the most. I do have a fun story about Corvus and Crater, but it's a bit of a long one. So basically, the Corvus is a crow, and crows used to be beautiful silvery white birds with beautiful singing voices. And that is nothing like what they sound like or look like these days. But it turns out that this crow was very greedy and selfish. And he was a servant to Apollo. And he was supposed to get him some water with Crater, his cup. And he decided to eat a bunch of figs instead and took too long. And then lied about not being able to get the water because of Hydra, the big water snake, keeping him from the river. Well, of course, the god knew that the crow was lying. And so he took away his beautiful singing voice and gave him the sound that crows make now. And because of for his lie, he took away his singing voice. And because of his greed, he gave him the coal black feathers of a crow. So there's another animal you can look for in the sky. Certainly there are all kinds of other animals, but a crow is one we'd actually know and see on a regular basis, as opposed to a lion or a sea snake.
And I love mythology.
Yes. And
there's
that's
lots of crazy stories about the animals in the sky, for sure.
That's pretty low on the horizon. If you live in an area where there's a lot of trees, will you still be able to see Corvus?
It depends. I suppose it depends on how close the trees are. But it's fairly highish in the sky. Okay. But it is kind of faint as well. So it's a little bit harder to see just because it's not as bright. But if you're out in the country somewhere, I think you should still be able to see it.
Very cool. And if you're out on a lake in the middle of nowhere, you probably...
Yes, lakes are a perfect place to be if you want to go sky gazing, for sure. As long as it's completely frozen,
right?
Which it should be by now.
I like how some of the names can also make sense in terms of their wildlife connection. Corvus, our crows are corvids family, and then the Cygnus, the swan. Cygnus is the species name for our trumpeter swans. So
I see a lynx in the sky.
Yes, well. Mm-hmm. Yep, we have lynx up there too. Yeah, there's lots of animals up in our sky. We actually oftentimes will do shows at the planetarium and talk about just the sky zoo. So the zoo that we see, all the animals that we see up in the sky. And then, compare them to the animals that we see on Earth as well. So that's always fun.
All right. We're on the screen and on your podcast in your ears today with Dr. Sara Schultz. She is the director of the planetarium at MSUM and talking about the February and March night sky and some beautiful sky viewing opportunities out there, I'm sure, in the coming weeks as we are in the downswing of winter, hopefully. Our little groundhog said we had 6 more weeks, but maybe if we have clear skies, that's all the better. We can get out and see at night. So that's very cool. And I'm always the one that has that little saying, first star, what is it? Star bright, starlight, first star I see tonight. Is there one star that comes out before all the others, or is it just whoever, is it just your own eyes that may see?
So it is partially your eyes, but also, it's typically if you have a particularly bright star, it just depends on where you're looking. Sometimes those first stars that people see are actually planets. Because oftentimes the planets are usually brighter than the stars are. And so you'll be able to see them sooner than you'll be able to see any of the stars start to show up after sunset. But it really just depends on the time of year and where you're looking. And so it's not typically a star that is well known for coming out first.
All right.
So when I'm driving home, it's getting dark. Let's say we'll just say 7 o'clock. And it's getting pretty dark at that time. I'm looking south. The bright star would be Mars then probably.
Probably, yes. Although if it's at 7 o'clock, actually, let's see here. Let me rewind time just a little bit. At this time of year, right around 7 o'clock, you're going to see, if you see kind of an orangish looking star, it's going to be Mars. Although Sirius is down here closer to the horizon. And Sirius is the brightest star in our nighttime sky.
Oh.
So there's a very good chance that if you see a bright star close to the horizon towards the south, then that's probably Sirius. And you can use Sirius to kind of shoot up into the sky to find the belt of Orion as well. Usually we work the other way around, so we use the belt stars to shoot down to Sirius. But you know that if you can find a really bright star in the southern sky, then you're probably getting pretty close to finding Orion.
Okay. Very cool. All right. And I just have to ask, because the last time we spoke to you, Dr. Schultz, we were talking about the Jupiter and Saturn conjunction. And where have they gone?
So, it's funny because I was just looking before we started visiting, and I was looking in the software here, and they're actually really close to the sun right now. So they're in our daytime sky. If we could turn off the sun, we'd be able to see them. But of course, the sun is much too bright for that. So they haven't gone anywhere. We just can't see them because they've moved closer to the sun in their orbit. So.
Right.
Well, I'm looking forward to our next full moon. That is also a great time to be outside in the evening when you can actually find your way around. But I love, moon shadows when the moon is so bright that the trees have really prominent shadows, and you can, see so much happening. So it's a great time to, to really kind of see all of the odd things that happen, that normally you don't see because it's dark.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The bright moon can really, it can be really a neat experience if you're out. Maybe you're cross country skiing or something at night, and it's fun to be out there when it's so bright. You wonder how it's just surprising how bright it can be.
And with the snow, I feel like in the wintertime it's even brighter with that reflection off the snow. So it feels like twilight, or daytime when you're out there. And of course, this time of year it's it doesn't have to be really late, 8 o'clock at night, and it's would normally be dark unless there's a full moon, right?
Right, exactly.
And how the moon phases too. I like watching those, like the fingernail moon, and also how the moon changes color, with its when it rises and then when it sets as well.
Right. It's like a sunset and a sunrise. It's the same with the moon. Right. And if you are interested in going out to do some moon observing, if you have a small telescope or if you have binoculars, the best time to do it is when it's not full, because you want to be able to see, number one, the full moon is super bright, so it could be kind of hard to look at with binoculars or with a telescope. But if you look at it when it's partially covered, so if you have like a crescent moon or a half moon or something, you can really see the texture better. It gives a lot more perspective. And it's really neat, especially to look along the terminator, so that line between day and night, to see the topography there. And it's really fun. I've seen it before, and it just blows my mind. So just some hints if you want to do some moon observing, that's the best time to do it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Even, we've a lot of folks have been taking pictures of the moon, and you often see that during full moon, but that's a great tip because I do feel like I always wondered why it always seemed more crisp and when it wasn't quite full.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder to get a photograph of the moon.
I think it really has to do with just the way that we perceive things. But because when it's all illuminated, then you don't have anything to kind of compare to. There's no contrast there. And so it kind of just all blends together. But when you have that definite change, you can really see the shadows too are really neat. You're talking about tree shadows, but the shadows from the craters and things are really neat to look at as well. So
Great. So some good tips if you're heading outside, and make a point to head outside at night, and all the more importance to for those dark skies at night, find a place where you don't have a lot of light pollution, and gaze up at the stars and the moon and take it all in and take a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
All right, Wild Times in Minnesota Lake Country with Kelly and Carol and Dr. Schultz today, Dr. Sara Schultz from MSUM's Planetarium. She's the director. And has the planetarium opened up, or do you have a kind of a schedule formulating a little bit? Or
we're talking about kind of starting to open things up. We're able to open up a little bit now to small groups. But we don't have a definite plan yet for kind of a timeline. I'm hoping that it's sooner than later. But of course, we want to be careful as well, and especially for myself and my staff as well. So we are starting to slowly open. I'm not sure. I'm hoping we can plan some sort of a grand reopening type thing, but at this point, we're not sure when that would be. So,
okay,
one day at a time.
Right.
So go out and see the real thing. Bundle up and head outside.
And then just look up.
There you go.
It's pretty easy to do. Well, Dr. Schultz, thank you so much for joining us today and for your time. And we will definitely have you back.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. Wild Times in Minnesota Lake Country with Kelly and Carol, and fascinating stuff. I always like talking about the night sky.
Yes, that is my favorite time to watch the sky. Although there are some really great summertime, when the sky is really clear and no moon, but there's something much more crisp and amazing about that winter sky. You can just see a little deeper, a little farther, I think.
All right. Well, Kelly, soon we'll be able to get outside again in the coming episodes. I'm so excited. I think, just the fact that it's not as dark as long, I can tell the morning is a little bit brighter earlier, and definitely at night it's staying lighter longer. So those are some great signs that gives you some new hope for the coming months to get out there and enjoy nature. But like Kelly said, you can get out anytime. It's not the cold, it's how you dress.
Right. To do a little owl prowling in the moonlight. Perfect time for that. Our barred owls and great horned owls and screech owls and saw-whet owls. They're all just pretty active, into February, looking at setting up territories. And so who knows, it could be loud and bright.
As usual, Kelly, always a wild time. And thanks to Dr. Schultz for appearing on the show with us today. Until we meet again, have a wild time of your own.